Hey, ufologers. Today we're going to be covering this very interesting story about Sharon Stahl, where she encountered burns on her eyes and on her face while in the playground. She saw this craft for just a few minutes, but what makes this particular case so interesting and what adds credibility to it is that it happened during the same time frame as Lonnie Zamora. There have been multiple witnesses that told their testimony to newspapers, and there were also 3 military bases in and around that area, being the White Sands, Holloman, and Kirkland. So we're going to cover all of that here today. I'm very excited for this episode as I've been sitting on it for quite some time, and I thought, gotta do it. We got to finally cover it. And her in particular, Sharon, it's very, very interesting, especially those that did the research and did the investigations when it happened in 1964. And so, starting off with this first newspaper clipping, and it states, here's the girl, here's Sharon, but I'll make it larger for everyone to read, pause it, zoom in, however you like. But it's a report of a 10-year-old girl that she was burned while watching a strange egg-shaped thing in the sky yesterday afternoon, according to the newspaper. And a report in the same newspaper clipping, which we'll get to a little bit later, is also of a truck driver and his wife that saw 2 mysterious objects in the air in and around Socorro as well. But looking at Sharon first, because we're not only covering what the news article talks about here, but some other very strange answers that were given to the newspaper soon after this one. But first, it starts off with how Sharon had this kind of rash go around her eyes, all across her face, even her nose as well. And when she comes back home from school, from the Lowell school, that's the name of the school, she tells her mom everything. She's like, Mom, this and this and this happened. They took her to the hospital. She gets checked out, and it looks like mild radiation burns. Something worth noting is that all the things mentioned in this newspaper and other ones pertaining to Sharon, her mother spoke for her over and over again. Just that's worth keeping in mind. And so Sharon and 5 other students saw it. Sorry, 1 of 5 children. And so it was both her, Sharon, and her sister Robin that saw it. Robin was 8 years old at the time, but she looked at it and then quickly looked away. She didn't really have any interest to stare at this huge craft in the sky during recess time. So she goes and she runs away. But Sharon, according to the newspaper, started it for about 10 minutes or so. But when she told her mom said, my daughter doesn't lie. She's not a liar. She never gets sunburns either. It's very strange that she comes back home with these strange burns across her face. I believe my daughter, Mr. Journalist, Mr. Policeman, because I go to the police as well. And my daughter is no liar. So who are you going to believe? The daughter and the mother, or the investigator that we're going to get into just a little bit later? So she was treated at the Baton Hospital. She was there for about an entire day, and they had to draw the blinds to protect her inflamed eyes and eyelids as well. But part of her face and nose appeared to be puffy and red, and she continued to complain of the burn pains. We've heard this in a lot of different cases. Maybe one that might strike you first is the Cash Landrum incident in Dayton, Texas. They suffered from radiation burns on their hands. One of the witnesses had mentioned that the car console, when she put her hand against it, it melted, leaving a hand print, which is crazy. But here, as I had mentioned at the beginning, there are 3 military bases in the area, which we're going to keep revising that over and over again because it's going to play a very big role. And Crypto, thank you. Christina, you're muted. That's so embarrassing doing it live and having my first minute on mute. Just fantastic, right? But you know what? It is what it is. And that's just the highlight of catching shows live. It's catching all the live bloopers, and there's no going back from that. So Sharon's doctor said that he diagnosed her with a membrane inflammation of both eyelids and first degree sunburn under her eyes and the nose, adding quotes coming from the article. The sun exposure she had yesterday will usually be considered insufficient to cause the burns and inflammation. It appears to be the type of burn and inflammation caused by longer exposure to the sun. But if we go back to what the mother said, she said, my daughter never gets sunburns, and she's not dumb enough to look at the sun for such a long period of time and say it was actually a UFO. It was a weird alien craft in the sky. Her mom was like, my 10-year-old daughter is not that dumb. But then it just gets more strange. After I came across this case, I thought, there has to be more data. I only have this one newspaper clipping. There has to be more. Where is she now? Does she have social media? Where are you, Sharon Stahl? And I found almost nothing. Almost nothing. Then I came across a book that was written by Timothy Green called Wicked This Way Comes. And the claims what happened to Sharon next are actually, I'm not even joking when I say this, they're actually insane. I was lost for words, and even I was a little skeptical. Let me tell it to you. So in the book, he writes that according to Mrs. Stahl, the mother, Sharon underwent dramatic physical changes following her encounter with the UFO. In just 1 month after the sighting, the young girl reportedly grew 5.5 inches taller and gained 25 pounds, transferring from a 4'8" 85-pound child to a 5'2" 110-pound preteen. And her mother noted that Sharon not only experienced these remarkable physical changes, but also displayed sudden maturity, like cooking meals, cleaning the house, and caring for children instead of playing with dolls that she had before. And then it says, I'm so confused, I don't know what to believe, Mrs. Stahl confessed, calling the aftermath of the incident a nightmare and wishing that her daughter had just skipped school that day. Isn't that weird? This girl, according to Mrs. Stahl, had an instant growth spurt. Now, if you have kids or if you remember going through that, we've all had those strange moments where you just magically grow a few inches. Your shoes no longer fit. Your shirts are too small. You're getting acne. It's a horrible transition from kid into adolescence. But in this case, growing 5.5 inches in a short period of time is very strange. But here is the however part. There was one investigator, just one, that tried to follow up on this. And she was the co-founder of the APRO. Oh, I'll get back to that. Where? I had the image, but it's okay. So it's looking at the co-founder of the APRO, Carol Lorenzen. And she's a ufologer, just like us. And she had doubts about the whole thing. She's like, this story isn't adding up. I couldn't find the doctor who diagnosed her with these things. I couldn't find the journalist that somehow it's a family friend of the Stahls. And now I'm hearing this story that Sharon grew 5.5 inches in just a matter of weeks. So she was like, red flag. And again, she's the co-founder of the APRO, which is all about UFOs. That was her research. And so she'd be the first one to believe the story. But she said, something smells a little fishy over here. Wouldn't you think the same? Maybe let me know in the comments, let me know in the live chat if you think that this is sounding just a little bit strange or if you're going for it. Because to this day, we don't really have all the answers. But here is what Jim and Carol Lorenzen said. Because they finally managed to meet the Stahl family after several attempts, having discovered their phone had been changed to unlisted. And they found that Mrs. Stahl's dramatic claims about her daughter's condition, including accelerated adolescence development, rapid growth in height and weight, and eye problems, required artificial tears. Like the mother was crying crocodile tears of, my daughter, she's growing up so fast, and she was terrorized by this UFO, and I just don't know what to do as a mother. So Carol Lorenzen was like, I'm seeing through those crocodile tears. What's going on? And why didn't you want to meet me the first few times? I tried contacting you over and over and over again, but either I couldn't get hold of you or there was some kind of excuse. If you really believe this and you told the newspapers you'd be willing to talk to me, a ufologer, right? So that was a little strange. And upon direct observation, the Lorenzens noted that Sharon showed no physical growth or being more mature for her age, though she did have some facial blemishes resembling typical adolescence pimples and somewhat irritated eyes, casting doubt on the more sensational aspects of the case that had been reported to them in a series of phone calls from Mrs. Stahl. Okay, hold up, back it up, take a few steps back. Mrs. Stahl was the one that called the Lorenzens, the people from the APRO. And then when the Lorenzens tried to do a follow-up, now the phone is disconnected. Now it's unlisted. Okay, where are we going with this? So, with this case, who do you believe? The newspaper and the daughter? Who didn't speak, by the way. It was all done through the mother. The mother was the mouthpiece. Or do we believe the fellow ufologers who went there and stormed into their house practically and said, show us the daughter. What's going on here? And they weren't believing it. But this newspaper is insane to say something like this. This little girl minding her own business at the playground, saw a UFO for 10 minutes, got burned, and then somehow grew 5.5 inches. And the reason to why it got so much traction during that time in April of 1964 was because of Lonnie Zamora, because of the egg-shaped craft that he saw and that he wished he didn't. He mentioned to journalists during that time frame of, if I ever see a UFO again, I am running as fast as I can, never telling a soul. Because he was labeled as the UFO policeman. Every newspaper wanted to get a hold of him. He did a documentary just a year after, by the way. And no one was really giving him a break. But it was because of him that a story like this became so popular. But there were a lot of things happening in New Mexico during that like week to 2 week time frame, which would again add a layer of credibility to Sharon Stahl's case, right? Because you're getting all these different testimonies, which we'll get into, back to back, all seeing strange things in the sky. You would just assume, okay, what Sharon is saying must be true, right? But the Lorenzens weren't convinced on this particular incident. Now, if we get into our next one about the truck driver, and this is just a visual aid, that's not the actual truck driver, but his name was Napoleon Green. He was 37 years old, and his wife, 35, said they sighted 2 UFOs traveling at about the speed of jet planes at 5:30 p.m. as they were driving toward Albuquerque, 17 miles north of Socorro. This news segment is in this newspaper clipping. So you're getting 2 stories for the price of 1. Awesome stuff. But there's more to this. And it says here, I wasn't going to report it because I didn't want to believe my eyes, Mr. Green said. He said his wife dived beneath the truck's dashboard after seeing the egg-shaped thing about half the size of jet planes and shining brightly in the setting sun. Green said he saw them possibly 2 minutes before they disappeared over the eastern horizon. Then the FAA, the Federal Aviation Agency officers, said they have seen nothing unusual in the sky or on their radar screens. Remember that because we are going to revise that little detail. Write that down. And airplanes appear only as a small dot on the screens, and it is unlikely a UFO could be distinguished from an airplane on radar. But the FAA said, I'm not seeing anything. And I'm going to give you a little spoiler. Holloman, Kirkland, and the White Sands said the same thing. I'm not seeing anything on radar. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what accent that was, but that was the accent that I imagined these radar operators to have. J. Allen Hynek was not convinced by that either, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm getting too excited because there's just so many weird little things in this UFO flap that took place in New Mexico. The Weather Bureau, the FAA, the Kirkland Air Force Base said that there were no balloons or other strange appearing objects in the sky there during that time frame, at least to their knowledge. And this was also at the same time, the same day that Sharon Stahl, the 10-year-old girl, had her UFO sighting. But you know what? Now it's getting good. And Santos, thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member. You're awesome. And thank you for everyone watching this live. Hit that like button right down below and subscribe if you haven't already. If you like UFO news, interviews, case studies, and more, this is the channel for you. But this next article that took place during the same time might be one of my favorites because it just represents all of the United States in just a sentence. And that's this one right here. Edgewood man says he shot and hit flying object. It's just so great. So he says here that there were no less than 6 authentic spottings that were seen on that Friday in April during the same time frame that Lonnie Zamora saw his egg-shaped craft land on the ground. But Don Adams of Edgewood told state police he fired 12 .22 caliber pistol shots at an oblong thing earlier that day. And he said that when he saw this thing, he knew he hit it at least 6 of those times, hearing the bullets bounce from it. So he shot 12 times, and he knows for sure he hit this object 6 of those 12 times. And as he paused to reload, the man said the object moved silently northward. He was unable to determine whether, well, he says here, he was unable to determine between 7 to 12 bullets struck the object, but he knows for sure it was 6. And then he described it as being this light green color, about 25 to 30 feet long and completely silent. And he said it hovered about 100 feet directly above his head. Here's an image of what Edgewood looks like in New Mexico. And it's about 30 miles east of Albuquerque, by the way. And then just a few hours earlier, in that same newspaper clipping, a motorist in the Las Vegas area reported seeing a ball of fire, which apparently landed near a radio station. And employees of the radio station said the man asked what his name was, and he asked him, the motorist said, please withhold my name. Don't be telling nobody because I don't want to be laughed at. And then police in that area received similar reports. But you know what? I have more for you. Of course, I have more for you. Because then you have Orlando Gallegos, who told of seeing an egg-shaped metal object about 50 miles north of Santa Fe. And he said that he saw these flying flame spurts from these numerous jets around the bottom of the object as it took off. So this object, whatever it was, we're going to call it a UFO, had a bunch of flames coming out of it, and then the object just took off. And then you had the state police captain, Martin Vigil, who checked out the incident and said, quote, "There was definitely something there." So Lonnie Zamora wasn't the only policeman that saw a UFO, wasn't the only policeman that saw evidence of not only indentations on the ground, but also scorched land, which we'll get into. But yet, Lonnie is the most famous policeman of all time when it comes to UFOs. Because he was the most vocal about it. These other guys kind of kept their details very much to themselves until the news cycle focused on something else and no longer on the UFOs. But other reports came from an Albuquerque motorist who saw a silver thing object where two men were driving in that area. And in both Socorro and the Madera reports, burned land was found at the sites. Also discovered were paw prints, like mountain lions, as well as landing gear marks. But you know what? This is where it gets worse. Because you would think, oh my gosh, photographic evidence, right? Show me the paw prints. Show me the scorched land. Give me the goods. Well, the Associate Director of Interplanetary Intelligence of UFOs said from his Oklahoma City office that pictures of a UFO sighted in 1956 of a spaceport radar officer were mailed to Lonnie Zamora. So this took place just a few years before, and this guy was like, I'm going to send you some great images. But Lonnie never got them. What is up with that? I know we had snail mail back in the day. Email, such a beautiful thing that we have now. But yeah, just mailing pictures, anyone could just snag that. But it's disappointing that in 1964, where the scorched land was and these strange paw prints that look like mountain lions, there should have been pictures. You're not gonna find any. I've tried, and maybe I wasn't looking in the right places. But if you know where those pictures are, send them to me at Christina@ufonews.co, because I would like to see them very much. But I couldn't find any. So it just gets from bad to worse. All we have are these witness testimonies. But it's so nice, at the very least, that these newspapers, even in 1964, were willing to cover them. However, these clippings were buried in the newspaper. It wasn't the front page, wasn't even the second page. When it came to the Sharon Stahl incident, it was in between comics and sports. According to the book by Timothy Green, Wicked This Way Comes. That's what he said. And I thought, typical. That's the same thing that happened when we got our UFO preliminary reports from the UAPTF, from the AOI MSG, from Arrow. It always came at the end of the news cycle, usually dropped on a Friday evening, where no one was expecting it to be dropped, right? These guys are following the same blueprint from 1964. So disappointing. But that's why you come to channels like these, where we fill in the gaps for you. We tell you how it is, and we give you the goods that we can find. Because that's what it's all about. It's hard to do it on your own. I get it. Been there. And that's why you come here. so we can help you and save you so much time of investigations. And I want to say hello to everyone catching this live, like Chris and Jam and Infinite and Bird Dog. That's a fun name. Zen, good to see all of you guys. Hit that like button right down below as well. Yeah, Zen says, not front page news then. I know you can't say that, but you should, right? When it comes to UFOs, it should always be on the front page. It's so interesting. But they gotta bury it some way and somehow. So lame. Well, there's more. There's more. If you're not familiar with the Lonnie Zamora case, I'll just drop you a few sentences on this one. Because he initially responded to what he thought was a car accident or a fire south of Socorro. But upon approaching the scene, he discovered an egg-shaped metallic craft with two small figures near it. And as he got closer, the object made a roaring sound, rose into the air with the blue flame underneath it, and then went away horizontally. Zamora then immediately radioed dispatch to report what he had seen, making it one of the most credible UFO sightings in history due to his status as a respected police officer. But in his investigations that he tried to do, J. Allen Hynek got involved in this case in 1964. And one thing that was mentioned, you can see it in this newspaper right here, is that the very next day, after Lonnie had his sighting, two people from the Kirkland Air Force Base went to investigate and they immediately brought their Geiger counter to check out the area. Huh. That's just a random piece of equipment to bring with you, right? So strange. Very strange. And these two people were Major William Connor and Sergeant David Moody. And they went ahead and they checked White Sands, which is right next to Holloman Air Force Base. But neither base, even Kirkland Air Force Base, mentioned that they used or had in their possession any object comparable to Zamora's described craft. So calls were done to these bases by policemen and by J. Allen Hynek, but they gave no information to the public. They're like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's not mine. Is it yours? Shrug shoulders. I don't know. That's exactly what happened. Now, the reason to why I'm highlighting these bases so much, because they have a rich history with UFOs. If you look at the White Sands missile range, is that there was a notable incident that took place in July 14th of 1951 when radar operators tracked a fast-moving object, and a tracker watching a B-29 with binoculars saw a large UFO near the bomber. And then another observer shot 200 feet of about 35 millimeter film, showed a round, bright spot, though the film has never been released, as we always hear. But there was another sighting in 1959 where a captain working on the Redstone missile project observed a UFO near the launch tower. So that's just a little, well, not only that, but there's also been some other very strange things that have been seen in and around White Sands, not only in the 50s, but there are even some more modern sightings of UFOs being seen in that area. Then if we look at the Holloman Air Force Base, I know you know this one, but I'm just going to touch on it. Because you had the alleged UFO sighting from 1974, as claimed in the documentary UFOs Past, Present, and Future, created by Robert Emenegger. And as that documentary goes and the interviews that were given by Robert Emenegger, he stated that the Air Force was involved in the creation of the documentary, the Pentagon as well, and a few other military forces. And at the Pentagon, Emenegger had someone on the inside, and they said, we will give you the legitimate footage of the UFO landing at Holloman Air Force Base for you to put in your movie. Fast forward, they never got it. Never, ever. Instead, they had to do an artist rendition of what happened in the documentary. But that's just one thing that's happened. Also, Holloman Air Force Base is famous for the Eisenhower Treaty as well. So that's just a little bit of UFO history when it comes to that base. And then if we look at the Kirkland Air Force Base, on November 4th, 1957, two Civil Aeronautics Administration collectors observed a bright white and a dark egg-shaped object crossing the airfield, with brief radar contact confirmed. And the Air Force concluded it was a misidentified aircraft, but UFO researchers dispute this. And they're like, no, that was definitely a UFO. And then in the 1980s, Paul Benowitz, an Albuquerque businessman, claimed to have intercepted electronic communications from alien spacecraft near Kirkland, leading to speculation about the secret underground base at Dulce, New Mexico. And that case is very controversial, but I've done an entire show on it. It is a very interesting one where Paul Benowitz really thought he was tapping into the Air Force, where they were in communication with extraterrestrials. And then that's how we know about Richard Doty, who has mentioned time and time again as a disinformation agent. You want to give 20% of truth, 80% of lies and false information, and allow people to figure it out on their own. In this case, for Paul Benowitz, it was so bad that he passed away sooner than he should have, and he had mental breakdowns because of Richard Doty. At least that's what some people believe there. But you know what? You know what? It just gets better with this case, with this UFO flap in New Mexico. Because one thing that we've spoken about quite a few times very recently in the last few weeks is whenever a UFO is seen, jets, helicopters, planes are very quick to follow up on these craft. This was no exception, and I have more for you. Here's the newspaper clipping for it, because it says here that the Reyes family, a husband and wife, they saw what at least she described as a dish plate upside down and spun away just like a plate would spin if you flung it into the air. And it carried a light on the bottom, a very bright light. And she mentioned, I'm still shaking. You can see it right here, she added. She's like freaking out about this, about what she saw. But here is the kicker with this. You can find it right at the bottom, right here. Several small planes were in the area at the time, and she insisted the object she saw was no airplane. Dun, dun, dun. They were just nearby. Why were they so close? Why were they flying at that time? The possibilities and the excuses you can make are endless. But a pattern that we have seen so many times is when you see a UFO, you see jets, you see planes too close to it. Are they trailing it? Are they escorting it? I've heard it all. I've gotten a lot of comments, gotten a lot of emails of Cristina. They're not trailing it. They're escorting it. And I'm like, look, I'll listen. I'll listen. And some of that maybe will be very interesting if that were true. Could you imagine? Here, let's have some tea together. I want to take you to this really nice cafe. The best way to a person's heart is through their stomach. So offer them treats, tea, cookies and biscuits, some cake, maybe some sandwiches. That's how you make friends. It's through food, through snacks. But you know what? You know what? And I can't get enough of this. It only gets better. J. Allen Hynek. Here is a newspaper clipping from that. J. Allen Hynek, the astronomer who turned to UFO debunker for Project Blue Book, created by the Air Force. He says, my job is to explain everything away as best I can so that I can get my paycheck and that no one has to ask anything about UFOs. But after it closed in 1969, something changed in him. He was like, there's something more to this than what I can explain away as swamp gas, which he was the one that invented and created that conclusion for some UFO sightings. He ended up writing books, helping create UFO documentaries, and even at times he was a bit skeptical. When it came to the Lonnie Zamora incident, he said that was one case that was truly unexplained. There was no he couldn't give a good enough debunking answer for the Lonnie Zamora incident. And something else that he found really strange, according to this newspaper, was it says, quote, "It's my understanding New Mexico is infested with radar equipment. I'm going to check to see if there has been any radar confirmations that would tie right into these reports." But there was nothing. There was nothing that he could at least tell us publicly. And even though they're surrounded by White Sands, surrounded by Kirkland Air Force Base, Holloman Air Force Base, it really is infested with radar equipment. But we have none of that in 2025. None. And even Hynek was skeptical. He says, "I know what I'm meant to do. I know I cannot bite the hand that feeds me, but I have to give people a sensible answer." And this is, years, this is 1964. So he's been in the field for quite some time now. And his consciousness is kind of biting his ankles of, I can't keep giving people the swamp gas conclusion or an owl sitting on top of a tree conclusion. This one with Lonnie Zamora, there's a lot of information. There's a good amount of data. Where's the radar? Where's the radar data? And he mentioned that publicly in a newspaper. Now, was that good for his publicity or not? That is for you to decide. Because if I were reading this in 1964, I'd be like, you go, Hynek. You know what? I didn't like you at first, but now I'm kind of starting to like you. But in this case, if it was his boss reading this newspaper, might not be as good. And then Hynek just couldn't let this go. He couldn't let go of this case. He couldn't let go of all of the testimonies that were given to different newspapers in the area. So, 4 years later, in 1968, just a little before Project Blue Book is completely terminated, he says here in this, I'm going to call it an ad almost. $100 reward offered in saucer mystery. This is a great one. This one is so good because it says here, the mystery of a reported UFO 4 years ago south of Socorro on an isolated hill remains unsolved. And to help find clues to help solve the problem, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, chairman of the astronomy department of Northwestern University in Illinois, is offering a $100 reward to help locate a motorist who reported seeing the object. Remember I mentioned him just a little bit earlier? That he told the radio station, but he said, withhold my name. I don't want to be laughed at. That's the same guy. Then Opal Grinder, who was the manager of a Socorro service station at the time, reported the tourist, a man, remarked the aircraft flew low in the Socorro area, and Grinder said that there were several helicopters in the area. And he quoted the tourist as replying that it was a funny looking helicopter if it was even that. And Grinder quoted the man as saying the object flew directly over his car. And Grinder, unaware of Zamora's sighting, said he attached no importance to the report. He got this, he was like, it sounds kind of crazy. A UFO just hovering right over your car? No, thank you. And then years later, he hears about Lonnie Zamora and he says, oh my gosh, now there is something to this case. So J. Allen Hynek told the Las Cruces Sun News that he is in an effort to establish the Socorro sighting, and then he authorized the $100 reward, which will go to the person knowing the whereabouts of the motorist. But we have no news on if he found him or not. Did he? How would you? Anyone could claim, oh, that was me. Where's my moolah? Give me my dough. I need the monies. Right? Anyone could say, I was the one that saw the UFO. Here's what I saw, because it took place years later. There's already enough data to where they can kind of vaguely describe the UFO. It was an egg shaped. It had lights at the bottom, this, that, and the other. It took place in and around this area of Socorro. So I don't know how that went for him. There's no further updates on that, but I love the fact that J. Allen Hynek just couldn't let it go. He says, I need to know. 4 years. It was just eating him from the inside out, to where he said, it's time to put my money where my mouth is. It is now time to give people the reward they all want. $100. Now, someone in the live chat, please tell me, in 1968, $100, how much would that be today in 2025 with inflation? Someone tell me. I'll give you guys a few moments to give me that answer, because I'm curious. I would like to know. And also hit that like button right down below as well. There it is. Hit that like button. And while I'm waiting for that answer, we're seeing 1,000? That's a lot. Is it? I don't know if it's actually 1,000, but maybe it is. Yeah, you know what? I could just look it up, couldn't I? $100, 1964 is how much now? Oh, it is 1,000. You were good, dead fish. It is the equivalent of about $1,021. Some are saying 600, around 2,000. Are you guys just guessing now? 900, 1,000, 1,000. Okay, Scott, we're getting the same information. That's where I got my information. So yes, we're just gonna guess about $1,000. That's a pretty good deal. Even in today, I would be calling in, right? I'll say maybe I could help you out, but it's gonna cost you, right? Out of all the things that we covered right here today, which one was your favorite? Was the information about Sharon Stahl? Was it about the truck driver and his wife? Was it about helicopters and planes following UFOs? Was it trying to find out who this motorist, who he was? Putting money on the line to try and find him, and we still don't have the answer today on if they actually found him or not. What was your favorite part from today's show? I've been sitting on this one for some time. I've been excited to cover this one, and just like finding the right moment to do so, really collecting all the data that I could, because you're not going to just casually find this information almost anywhere. That's why it took me a little bit longer to really dive deep and go for it. And I'm very lucky that these newspaper clippings were found on the Black Vault. And that link will be in the description box below for you to look at as well, because we only covered a handful. There's a lot in that PDF that you can also look at on your own time. I will place that link down below. Scott says that his favorite part was the truck driver and his wife. That's a good one. It's always nice to have that extra witness next to you, right? Especially if it's a loved one. Yes, hit that like button right down below if you're enjoying the show. Thank you, Android, for doing that. Oh, the pictures I wanted to see were of the scorched land that were seen by policemen, and then the paw prints that were seen over the scorched land. They said that there were photographs, but we haven't seen them. No. There should have been photographs, excuse me, and they are nowhere to be found. So I would like to see them. And you can email me at christina@ufonews.co if you happen to have those pictures. It'd be so interesting to see. That is it for today. I want to say thank you to everyone catching this live. And Also, to all of my amazing YouTube members, Patreon supporters for the super chat, and the new member, you guys are amazing. And of course, all of my incredible moderators. That is it for today. I will see you next time. Be safe, and remember, keep your eyes on the skies. If you enjoy the strange and the mysterious, UFOs, the paranormal, and cryptids, this channel is for you. So make sure to subscribe, as I do 3 videos right here every single week, and hit that notification bell so you do not miss any of the bonus content I post right here.